Welcome back to Transformation Talks. This is an after the Amen deep dive into a really profoundly shifting message from Transformation Ministries' own speaker, Pastor Jeffrey West.
Yeah, the sermon titled Persevering Until the Fire Falls. It's just, wow, such a powerful one.
It really is. And, before we even get to the core of Pastor West's sermon, the entire service actually kicks off with this Memorial Day moment from Elder Richard Ross, and it genuinely resets how you look at the whole concept of endurance.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It creates this crucial psychological framework right at the start.
Right.
Because you really can't fully grasp the spiritual weight of Pastor West's message about waiting
Well,
without first, understanding the physical and emotional reality of being right in the middle of a struggle,
right.
which is exactly what Elder Ross lays out.
Spot on. Real quick, though, before we jump in, if you want to catch every single deep dive we do, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now.
Yes, please do.
So, our mission for today is to explore this fascinating intersection between the national observance of Memorial Day and the spiritual milestone of Pentecost. We're going to uncover exactly what it takes to persevere when you are just, stuck in that agonizing waiting room of life. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, so to set the foundation, we really need to look at how Elder Ross contextualizes Memorial Day. He takes us back to its historical origins during the waning years of the Civil War.
Oh, right.
Yeah, he notes that on May 5th, 1868, Major General John A. Logan issued General Orders Number 11.
Which was the Memorial Day Act, right?
Exactly. It was the act that officially established a time to decorate the graves of fallen soldiers.
And what I love is that Ross doesn't just treat that as like a piece of historical trivia.
Right, he really digs into it.
He does. He emphasizes the immense gravity of that sacrifice. Like, these soldiers didn't just give up their lives for a piece of cloth. They laid down their lives to secure the fundamental freedoms that citizens enjoy today.
Yeah, and he specifically highlights the freedom of speech, right?
Yeah.
The freedom to freely proclaim one's faith.
Exactly. He draws this very sharp, very sobering contrast between the freedom we experience and, well, the reality of suppressive regimes around the world.
Where simply owning a Bible is literally a capital crime punishable by death.
It's heavy. But what's fascinating here is how Ross pivots that profound National Day of Mourning into this deeply personal, spiritual rallying cry for anyone feeling fatigued.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because he points out a calendrical reality that honestly almost no one thinks about.
Right.
He mentions that Memorial Day falls roughly on the 145th day of the year.
Which, sounds like a totally arbitrary number until you do the math.
Exactly. When you hit day 145, you are just 37 days shy of the exact middle of the year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it serves as the gateway to summer. And Ross frames summer not just as a season of vacations, but symbolically, it's the brightest season.
Right. The time of year with the longest hours of daylight.
Exactly. The sun is at its absolute highest peak,
Yeah.
and the hours of darkness are at their absolute shortest.
That reframing is just incredibly powerful. Like, it makes me think of day 145 as the Wednesday or the hump day of a massive, exhausting project.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Right. Imagine you've been grinding away at something incredibly difficult. You're bruised, you're tired, you've endured setback after setback.
Yeah, and Ross even shares his own deep vulnerability during this segment.
He does, yeah. He talks about his personal battles with depression, like literally having to force himself to get up out of bed.
Which so many people can relate to.
Exactly. And when you are in that state and you hit the halfway point, your mind plays tricks on you. You're exhausted, so your default instinct is to just quit.
Because you feel like you've been in the dark forever.
Exactly. But Ross is saying if you can just recognize you're at day 145, you realize the darkest part is actually behind you. You're entering the season of the most light.
Man, that psychological shift is everything. And, it completely aligns with Transformation Ministries' 2026 theme of hope and perseverance.
Oh, absolutely.
Ross is using this national marker to tell the congregation, do not quit in the middle. Because the middle is the most dangerous place.
Because it's where you lose all of your perspective.
Right. You're too far from the start to remember the initial excitement, but you were just a bit too far from the finish line to actually see the reward.
So true. But, realizing you are halfway there is only part of the battle. The real question is how you survive the rest of that wait without losing your mind or giving up.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
And that's where Pastor Jeffrey West's sermon on Pentecost steps in as like a literal survival guide. If Memorial Day is the gateway to the summer, the upper room at Pentecost is the blueprint for how to actually wait for the breakthrough.
The transition there from the physical halfway point to the spiritual waiting room is just seamless.
It really is.
Pastor West starts by breaking down the timeline and the terminology. So the word Pentecost literally translates to 50th.
Right, meaning it takes place 50 days after Passover and the resurrection.
Exactly. And in the Old Testament, this was the Feast of Weeks, which was a harvest celebration.
But Pastor West points out that in the New Testament, specifically in Acts chapter 2, this harvest festival is radically transformed.
It becomes the exact moment the New Testament church is born.
And the mechanics of how they got to that moment are fascinating. I mean, Jesus spent 40 days teaching his disciples after the resurrection.
Yeah.
Then he ascends into heaven, and his final instruction to them is to go to Jerusalem and wait for the promise of the Father.
Which leaves a 10-day gap.
Right, 10 days of waiting.
And when the promise, the Holy Spirit, finally arrives, it's not some quiet, gentle breeze. Pastor West points out it arrives with wind and fire.
Which are so deeply symbolic.
Oh, heavily symbolic. Pastor West explains that the wind represents movement, breath, and life.
It wasn't just a subtle draft.
No, it was a rushing, mighty wind. It signaled that God was bringing fresh, undeniable activity. And then you have the fire.
Right.
The fire represents purification, intense passion, and the supernatural power they were going to need to survive the extreme persecution that was coming their way.
So what does this all mean? Because I've got to be honest, I struggle with this concept.
How so?
Well, when I hear the word waiting, I immediately picture like sitting at the DMV or in a doctor's office thumbing through a stale magazine.
Oh, yeah. The worst kind of waiting.
Right. It feels incredibly passive, frustrating, and honestly like a waste of time. But Pastor West is describing a 10-day wait in this upper room that sounds anything but passive. What makes this kind of waiting different?
You've hit on the exact misconception Pastor West tackles. We view waiting as inactivity. But he argues that in the spiritual realm, waiting seasons must be highly productive praying seasons.
Productive praying seasons.
Exactly. Picture the upper room. You have 120 people gathered there. They weren't just staring at the wall or checking their watches.
No, they were actively worshiping.
Yes, worshiping, praying intensely. They were spending those days processing the massive theological teachings Jesus had just unloaded on them over the previous 40 days.
And they were doing all of this completely in the dark regarding the timeline. That's the part that blows my mind.
It really is wild.
Like, they didn't have a calendar with a red circle around day 10 saying fire falls today.
Yeah.
They just had a vague instruction to wait.
Yeah, just wait.
It takes a massive amount of steadfastness to keep actively preparing when you don't even know if the breakthrough is coming tomorrow or like in 10 years.
Absolutely. They had to prove they could hold their posture without knowing the schedule. And, that brings up the greatest vulnerability of any waiting season.
Which is?
Well, when you are engaged in that kind of intense, indefinite wait, the environment you are in becomes critical. Pastor West argues that the greatest threat to your perseverance isn't actually the fatigue of the wait itself.
Right. It's the people you were waiting with. It's the division.
Precisely. The real threat is internal division.
Just think about the sheer psychological pressure cooker of that upper room. You have 120 distinct, flawed human personalities crammed into one space.
Oh, man. A recipe for disaster.
Seriously. You've got Thomas, whose defining characteristic is skepticism and doubt. You've got Peter, who literally just denied even knowing Jesus a few weeks prior.
Right.
There had to be tension. There had to be side eyes and whispered judgments.
And this is where Pastor West uses a brilliant, highly relatable modern analogy. He explains that the enemy doesn't usually try to destroy a massive spiritual movement with some grand theological debate.
No, it's always the small stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He tried to destroy unity with petty, irrelevant arguing points. Pastor West says, right while you were waiting for the promise of the Father, people will suddenly start arguing over who birthed the chicken.
Yes, the burnt chicken.
Or who didn't put gas in the car, or who left a dirty cup on the table.
I have to admit, when Pastor West started talking about burnt chicken, I felt that in my bones.
Oh, same here.
It is just so true to human nature. When we are stressed and waiting, we cannibalize each other over the most ridiculous things.
We really do.
It reminds me of a championship sports team. Imagine a team making it all the way to the finals. They are in the locker room right before the biggest game of their lives, and the coach steps out for a minute.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
If those players start screaming at each other over who gets the best locker or who took whose towel, they have completely derailed their mental preparation.
Oh, completely.
They lose the championship before they even step onto the court. Pastor West is establishing a hard rule here. You must consciously choose unity over division, because unity is the scaffolding of perseverance.
That locker room analogy is spot on. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Pastor West observes that when the Holy Spirit finally arrived, it didn't single out the individuals who were the most righteous.
We're the ones who had the best prayer etiquette.
Right. The fire fell because they were in one accord. They collectively decided to drop the burnt chicken arguments.
Yeah, they let it go.
And Pastor West contrasts this petty bitterness with the epic patience of David.
Oh, David and Saul.
Yes. David was anointed king but had to wait 23 years for the throne, all while the current king, Saul, was actively trying to murder him.
Which is insane.
David had every right to become deeply bitter, but he chose to get better. He refined his skills, he deepened his worship, he built his character.
Because bitterness is a parasite. As Pastor West notes, bitterness drains your spiritual strength. When you get offended over the burnt chicken, you isolate yourself.
And isolation weakens your faith.
Exactly. You separate yourself from the pack and become an easy target for discouragement. But the opposite is also true, right?
Right, touching and agreeing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like the example Pastor West gives of intentionally praying with his wife. That creates a fortress around you. It completely fortifies you against the petty distractions that inevitably pop up in the waiting room.
And once you establish that unified environment, you face the final and perhaps the most difficult hurdle before the breakthrough.
What's that?
You have to conquer the deeply ingrained human urge to overcomplicate simple instructions.
Oh, this is the trap, the art of finessing the plan.
That's it. That is exactly it. Pastor West asserts that, at its core, perseverance is often just simple obedience over time.
Simple obedience over time.
Looks back at the disciples. Jesus ascends and says, "Wait in Jerusalem." That's it.
Right.
They could have easily rationalized going back to their fishing boats to make a living. They could have returned to their hometowns because they felt discouraged or bored.
But they didn't.
No, they didn't. They simply obeyed the command to stay put.
And Pastor West warns that we constantly fail because we try to analyze, deconstruct, or finesse God's instructions.
We always think we know better.
We do. We try to inject our own philosophy into the mix instead of just executing the ask. And here's where it gets really interesting to me, because I know I am completely guilty of this.
We all are.
If I'm given a simple instruction during a stressful time, my instinct is to over-engineer it into a 12-step master plan because I'm desperate to feel in control. Why do we do this? Why do we act like Peter, who has the faith to step out of the boat and literally walk on water, but the second he's out there, he analyzes the wind and the waves and immediately starts to sink?
It's a control issue, absolutely. And Pastor West provides this really profound insight into it. He says we struggle with simple obedience because we improperly assign ourselves the responsibility of fulfilling the promise.
Wait, unpack that a little.
So we take on a job that isn't in our job description.
Yeah.
Our job is strictly the instruction, whether that is giving or laying hands on the sick or simply staying in the city and waiting.
Right, that's our part.
That's our entire scope of work. The immense pressure to actually bring the promise to pass, that belongs entirely to God.
Man, we stress ourselves out trying to do God's heavy lifting.
You do.
And a lot of that comes down to our obsession with timelines. We want the breakthrough on our schedule.
Precisely. And Pastor West brings up a beautiful theological distinction to explain this friction, the difference between chronos and kairos time.
Yeah.
Chronos is chronological time. It's the ticking of the clock, the turning of calendar pages, the sheer volume of days you've been waiting.
And that domain belongs to man.
Exactly. But kairos is the opportune time, the designated divine moment. That domain belongs exclusively to God.
Wow.
We exhaust ourselves stressing over the chronos, but the breakthrough only ever arrives in the kairos.
That distinction completely changes how you view a delay. It's not that the clock is broken, it's that the opportune moment hasn't aligned yet. But isn't it true that right as you approach that kairos moment, the chronos gets unbelievably loud?
What do you mean?
Like the distractions multiply right before the finish line.
Oh, yes. That is a critical warning from Pastor West. The enemy always fights the hardest right at the threshold of the breakthrough.
Right.
When you are moments away from your kairos, that is exactly when you will get the unexpected derailing phone call right when you sat down to pray.
Yeah.
That is when the most intense, illogical argument over a dirty cup on the table will break out. The goal of the enemy isn't to change God's mind. The goal is to agitate you into breaking your simple obedience.
So you walk out of the room right before the fire falls.
Exactly.
Wow. When you weave all of these threads together, you don't just have an inspiring message, you have a highly tactical roadmap for navigating the darkest waiting rooms of your life.
You really do.
It starts with Elder Ross and Memorial Day, recognizing you might just be at day 145. You've endured the fatigue, but the darkest part is over and the days are getting longer. You absolutely cannot quit in the middle.
And once you realize you're halfway there, you have to change how you wait. You transform your waiting room from a passive holding cell into an active, productive forge of worship and preparation.
Yeah, and you fiercely guard your unity. You recognize that the pressure of the wait will tempt you to turn on the people in the room with you. You have to consciously put down the arguments over burnt chicken and empty gas tanks, because unity is the only thing that sustains your perseverance. And finally, you commit to simple obedience.
Stop finessing the plan.
Exactly. You stop trying to finesse the instruction to regain control. You let go of the Chronos calendar, do the simple thing consistently, and let God carry the weight of the Kairos promise.
Which leaves us with one final paradigm-shifting thought to consider. We just established that the enemy deploys his heaviest distractions right at the threshold of your breakthrough.
Right.
If that is true, then could the intense frustration, the confusing delays, or the ridiculous interpersonal conflicts you are facing right this very second actually be the absolute best proof that your summer is just about to arrive?
Wow. That completely re-engineers how you look at frustration. Next time you feel like giving up, just remember that the fire never falls on the people who quit in the middle. It only falls on the people who stay in the room. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. If this conversation brought you value, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a deep dive.
And if you want to move beyond the analysis and actually experience the full power of these messages, you really need to plug into the community.
Absolutely. We invite you to join live on the Transformation Ministries VB YouTube channel or their Facebook page every single Sunday at 10 a.m.
Such a great experience.
It really is. And if you want to hear the raw, unedited power of Pastor West's message for yourself, you can watch replays of the entire uncut sermon right now on the Transformation Ministries YouTube channel. Until next time, stay in the room, keep the unity, and we will see you on the next deep dive.